All right, we are live, everybody. I'm here with Hellokay. Man, I've been a huge fan of this guy way back in the day when I had like 2 subscribers and he was giving us the daily news. And I was like, man, this guy's got the sexiest English accent. He's so smart.
Thanks.
And I was like, man, I just want to be able to like, be at this guy's levels one day. Still not there yet. But you
You've
just
passed me. You passed me already.
yeah, right. But one thing I love about you, man, you're a software engineer. You approach everything so technically. One thing that I really admire is you got this thing about you where you can break down information into really digestible chunks where like, the average person like me can understand it. And so like that's why I was like, excited to kind of have you on today and kind of talk about like, Vivi, but also like, the whole macro Web3 stuff. And pretty much if you can also just give us direction into that world. So what's going on, dude? Good to see you.
Yeah, no, it's good to have. It's good, good being on. Like, we've known each other for quite a long time now, since the very, very early days. A small group of us OGs. The space kind of blew up, and then the space shrunk, and it's like the same group of people left in it now. um, yeah. I mean, it's been good, like seeing the shift in momentum with like people's reasonings for like being in the space, but also it's good to see who it is like yourself, for example, that really want to develop that understanding, develop that knowledge of like the space as a whole, whether it be like the underlying tech, whether it be the use case, whether it be layers that can build on top in the future. Just people. Like I've told you before. Like I really like talking to people who are like hardworking and want to learn. Like that for me is like one of my like simple pleasures. It's just talk to people who want to who want to talk to you basically.
That's pretty cool, man. I appreciate that, bro. And that's like I've seen that from you, you know what I mean? And I think there's been a lot of people that, didn't know much about NFTs or even collecting, only 2 short years ago and now understand it so well, right? They understand like, first on chain and all these different things. And you talked about a space that you had today. Maybe you can dive into that were like, people were battling about, I guess, different technicalities on L1 versus L2 and all these different things. And then you kind of came in and kind of explained it, like I said, in a really kind of digestible format. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of walk through that again. And I've got some tweets too that people put out, but what's your take on that, man?
Yeah, of course. It was funny because we've been talking a lot about the new developments happening in the space. Kyle's been really great in this kind of side of things too. He's been showing me AR Weave, which is a way of storing assets on chain. And before I go into that, because and I don't want to like make people's ears bleed, like we've been discussing a lot about the different layers involved in blockchain and the EVM and the smart contracts and things like that. What I can do actually is maybe just to add some more context is maybe I can bring up let's see, I'll bring this up, right? I don't know
Yeah,
if you
nice.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can like share that to the screen if you want. Yeah, so this is quite cool. So this is
Wow.
Veve smart contract. So this exists on Ethereum. Anyone can go read it, check it out, see what they do. And I've read through this. It's actually, I expect it to be similar to pretty much every other project, and like it's very similar. So all projects they tend to use. They don't write their own contracts from scratch, obviously, because that's a bit silly. Like it is already gold standards of contracts out there. So Open Zeppelin, usually get your contracts from there. And what's quite cool, right, is they have a function on here which all contracts have. Let me just search that up. Okay, so if I just go straight to that, right? What's quite cool is, can I? Okay, there we go. Yeah, can I zoom in to this?
There you go.
Okay,
Nice.
easy. Yeah. So this function here, this is kind of like the key that I've been trying to show people. So this mint4 function, basically what it does, right, is it takes an address that it's going to, which would probably be, your wallet address, your, personal wallet. And, we can ignore the quantity for now, because, let's say you just mint one token, it's your one token you've bridged. And then, your blob, this is interesting. The blob is basically like your collection of data that's from IMX,
Right.
your token ID, like the royalty information and all that stuff, right? And then what it will do is it'll basically take it and it will mint it to your wallet. as its own individual NFT on Ethereum, right? And so I've been kind of like trying to talk people through. And here's an example of one, because DC does it already with Hero. Yeah, so what you do is you basically get this minting date. Let me see if it shows in the transactions. Oh yeah, so here, like, so action, it was minted 390 days ago. So you get your own token. It's got like its token ID standard, the person, the creator. So that'll be like, the Veve contract. And then you've got your owner, which would be your, the address that you've minted it to, right?
Right.
So the whole topic that I was basically trying to help people in spaces understand is there's IMX and there's Ethereum. And there's an important concept that I think helps this whole kind of Web3 thing click for people is with the EVM, right? The way the EVM works is any transaction on the Ethereum blockchain, there is a fee, like you have to pay the toll. Like you cannot get around it. You can't, there's like no magic, some, fancy voodoo magic involved. Like you have to always pay a toll. And so it's like the laws of thermodynamics. Like you can't create energy. Like you can only change it from one form to another. Like you can't just create transactions for free. Like you have to, swap over a fee. So if that concept is like 100% clear, then you then move on to the next aspect is you have to then start to question, how do we do gasless transactions on layer 2? And through that, if you're curious, you're inquisitive, you then start to like look into that, like how does this work? And so the way that I've basically explained it is every transaction on Ethereum is always going to have a cost. So if you mint 100 NFTs, you're gonna pay gas 100 times, right? But we're not doing that with IMX. So you're doing thousands of transactions. How are you not paying gas for that? And so I basically explained that if you imagine like a spreadsheet, right? So there's a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet, it's every hour is being populated with everything that's happening on IMX. And now IMX, they've got like a bunch of databases and services and things. It's not a blockchain in itself, right? Layer 2s can be blockchains, but IMX, because of the purpose of keeping it gasless, they choose to kind of do it, in a more like architected way where it's like databases. I think they probably use AWS. But all those transactions are basically being like listed in this spreadsheet, right? So Kay sent a Batman to Chad. Chad then sent that Batman to Kyle. Kyle then burnt it. Like it's like lines of data that's happening. So after, let's say a random arbitrary amount, like after an hour, right? What happens is that spreadsheet with all these transactions, that gets sent as one individual commit to the Ethereum blockchain. So because you're taking these thousands of transactions that are happening in, let's say, an hour, and you're sending it as one transaction to Ethereum, how many times are you going to pay gas? You're only going to pay it once. And that's how they keep it gasless. But if you look in the spreadsheet, it's got thousands of rows. So rather than sending each row as an individual transaction, paying gas each time, you're basically bundling them up into one commit, sending that one commit to the Ethereum blockchain. Now, that becomes a bit weird now, right? Because that transaction that's being sent to Ethereum, that's good for verifying that K sent Chad a Batman. Everyone can see that, right? Obviously, you have to like kind of pass through the data because it's like it's on Ethereum, but everyone can see that now. The question then comes to that thing that's now on Ethereum. What is that? Is that an NFT? Is that a cryptocurrency? Like it's neither. It's just you can think of it as a file that helps, that the IMX protocol uses to help verify who has done what within their own layer 2. Now, if you want to own an NFT that's tied to an asset, then you have to do the next part. And the next part is exactly what I showed you on the smart contract. So what IMX does is, if you've used the Hero platform, I think you've used Hero before, Chad.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I'm not as I'm not a crazy collector like the Gale or any of those guys, but or like who's a big one, like Michael Campa or even you, right? Are on it pretty good.
Like these guys, yeah. So basically, Hero enables this. Veve has this in their smart contract. So I'm gonna say why this is bullish in a second, right? But what would happen is Veve would then be like, okay, you can now sign into IMX with your, connect your IMX account to your Veve account. You can then bridge your Veve NFTs to your IMX wallet. Then you can mint it. And what that minting will do is it's going to call this function, right? And so this function is going to look at your wallet, your address that you're connecting to. It's going to look at, which NFT you're minting. So let's say you've got, I don't know, Todd Batman. So it's going to be, okay, you have an IMX Todd Batman with, this edition number, this royalty amount, whatever. And then it's then going to be like, okay, pay $16, $15 in gas. Actually, it should show you on, what the fee was. Yeah. So let me see if I go into this transaction hash. Yeah. So this one, actually, the transaction fee, the person paid, let me zoom in just to make it easier. So this person paid $15.61 in gas on that day to mint a dark side. I think they got ripped off, actually. I don't think this card is even worth $16, but yeah, like, at the time it was probably, like I've got a dark side, I want a dark side first NFT on the blockchain, that kind of thing. So maybe they did it. But yeah, you can see it transacted with the immutable X bridge. So for Veve, it's going to be the exact same thing. You're going to have a NFT on layer 1 that transacts with the immutable X bridge. So you can see, actually, if I go back to the point where I said every transaction with Ethereum, it costs a fee. You have to pay that toll. And you can see this person paid that fee, which was $15.61 on that day. Now, imagine on Veve, if you had, I don't know, 5,000 NFTs minted and every single one cost $15.61. All of a sudden, you're paying like nearly $100,000 in gas.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so, although every single NFT would have its own individual token that you can like move around your own wallets and list wherever you want and do whatever you want with them, like from a financial perspective, it doesn't make sense. And from the perspective of enjoying it in an AR environment and all that stuff, it doesn't make sense. For gaming, it doesn't make sense, right? It would only ever make sense for people who truly believe in, like, I want to own it in my own layer 1 wallet and I want to do whatever I want with it. And I want to have like this token that I can truly say is my own, which I can, essentially have full ownership. At that point, it kind of makes sense, but I would personally only do it for valuable NFTs because I have to weigh up the cost of the gas to the value of the NFT. If the NFT is $15 and I'm paying $15 gas, what's the point? And so that's basically how this whole thing works. And so I try and encourage people to, even if you don't know how to code, like the smart contract is there, I posted it, and there's a link below called Crypto Zombies. It's like a way where anyone can learn to read smart contracts. It's like a fun little like interactive tutorial thing where you kind of learn to create like a zombie generator with a smart contract. They do it literally like step by step. Wow. It's beginner friendly, like I would say. It's like the best Solidity tutorial out there as well. And so, yeah, like when you understand this whole process, then I think you're doing yourself justice by then jumping in and, participating in like, these kind of debates and things. Because when you jump into, and, I try to avoid it. Sometimes when I don't know enough about something, I'll just listen. But then when you jump in, and then you don't quite like have the base knowledge before you like start, I don't know, like pointing things out, you end up going through this back and forth misconceptions. So that's what happened in the space today. There were two people who were arguing back and forth, but when I jumped in, both of them agreed with me. And so it turned out they both actually agreed with each other. Just there was miscommunication and like a few aspects that they needed to like, really have broken down to the point where they're like, oh yeah, I agree. Oh yeah, like that's what I was trying to say. It's like, oh, okay, I misinterpreted. And then it's like, okay, like both of you agreed. So that's good.
That's super interesting. I mean, yeah, like thanks for that, that incredible breakdown there, man. And so I guess like, this is where it's confusing for me because even for now, like there's so many different viewpoints, right? Like some people are saying, they're saying that, oh, well, you need self-custody in order for these to be a true NFT, or other people are like, oh, well, these are already NFTs because you already have proof of authenticity or ownership on chain. Because I think, like, I forget exactly, it was like NFTs are digital assets that use blockchain technology to verify authenticity or something like that. And it was like, okay, well, that's already there. So it's like, and then I saw that that back and forth where you're saying, well, these are kind of pending NFTs. And so it's like there's a lot of different interpretations. But then my question is like, why would, you know, like Disney and Marvel and all these people come out and be like, hey, these are our first ever NFTs?
Yeah.
If let's just say, like, you know, hypothetically, that the technology or the technical implications weren't necessarily completely substantiated. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So this is the thing. So someone I know, oh, Javier Torres, the guy who, you know, the one that you said that you didn't know.
I like
Yeah,
that guy. He actually, you know
yeah,
what, like, we messaged back and forth about a few months ago. I know he's not as much into VV anymore because there's a few disappointments on his end, but I still
yeah,
think he means well. He's still very inquisitive,
yeah. Oh,
and I
yeah, he's
saw,
a nice guy. Yeah.
yeah, right. So yeah, sorry, what were we gonna say there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So Javier Torres, he basically, you know, props to him. He contacted Immutable X and he asked them a bunch of questions, and they actually answered. So, um, they do this thing where they use it's like a terminology thing. It's like verbiage. So sometimes they'll use words that mean one thing just for like the purpose of simplifying what they're doing. So there was like a line in a support, like an FAQ, where they said the
Yeah,
mutable X blockchain. And then he asked them, and it's like, are you guys a blockchain? And they're like, no, we're not, but we just called it a blockchain, but we're actually a scaling solution, but just for the purposes of simplification. In this FAQ, we called it we referred to it as IMX blockchain. But everywhere else, they call it IMX scaling solution for layer two. And
interesting.
so that kind of stuff is like, it made sense. And so strictly speaking, so this is super strictly speaking, an NFT is a technical specification. So what I mean by that is it's basically defines how certain data is collected together. And actually, what I can do is, let me see, C71 standard. So what I can show you is actually exactly what I mean by what is an NFT. So um,
I've got you on share again, brother.
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So that's coming up. Okay, yeah, cool, sharing. Yeah, so let's see, ERC 721, is it going to come up? Oh, that went too big.
Yeah, and you know, I wanted to say, like,
exactly.
here, I'll read you
Okay.
one of my. Okay, you got it there.
Oh yeah, kind of like this, right? I mean, this is more the metadata, but oh yeah, like this, right? So actually, that's still the metadata, but fine, I'll just go with this, right? So oh, actually, here we go. Yeah, so token ID, data, this kind of stuff, right? So an NFT, strictly speaking, is a collection of certain types of data arranged in a certain way. Like that's strictly what it is. So there's something that, you know, in tech we call it an object, right? So
Hmm.
an object is kind of like, think of it as like a bucket or a container. And so in that container, you would have certain things. So for an NFT, you would have a token ID, you would have like, you know, an address owner, you would have like contract like that it originated from. You would have, you know, maybe some royalty data. Um, you would have, you know, like an external asset link. For example, you know, a link pointing to maybe IPFS, or in Vivi's case, it points to Amazon Web Services, like, you know, their external hosting, like, you know, they got these things called S3 buckets. Um, so that's basically what an NFT is, right? Now, that's the basics of it. So when you expand on it further, you can get on-chain NFTs and you can get off-chain NFTs. So you could have an NFT with that same data structure, that same everything, but it's minted not on a blockchain for various reasons. For in the case of IMX, the way that they do it is they mint tons of these NFTs off-chain, because that's obviously how it is gasless, because you
Right.
have to pay the gas. Like I can show you, you don't want to pay $15 or whatever it was that day for every single token. And in order to verify that these tokens were minted, so some sort of proof, they take every single minting event, put it into like a list. So Chad's Batman was minted, Kay's Batman was minted, Kyle's Batman was minted. You know, so a big list of all the minted Batmans for that 1 hour that just passed. And then they'll take that one single list, pay the $15 to commit that individual list to Ethereum. So now at least there is some kind of way to prove that these events happened today. There is some kind of record on Ethereum, but that record on Ethereum that was just sent, that in itself isn't an NFT. It's a way to verify NFTs were created off chain. And then the next layer would be if you care about on chain NFTs, you want to show your token individually on its own on a blockchain, then you go into the case of, okay, allow me to bridge it and then mint it like I showed you with the dark side and the function involved for minting it. IMX calls that function. You just connect your wallet, and then now you have your own NFT with that's minted and it's on the blockchain. But that proof that shows all the layers, all the individual transactions in that one big commit, that exists as it is, and that always exists because that was already committed to the Ethereum blockchain. So that's kind of like the crux of it, right? So an NFT is a collection of data arranged in a certain way. And just to like really kind of like cement that in, right, is if you have a car has an engine, it's got probably doors, it's got wheels, it's got a steering wheel. Like these are fundamental things that make up a car. So you would know a car when you see it because you're looking for these things, right? And so that's similar to an NFT. It has to have like data that's certain types of data, like the token ID and things arranged in a certain way. And that's what we call the ERC 721 standard. For Veve, right at the early days, because they use GoChain, they basically copied the same standard. It's nearly the same, but they call it the Go 721 standard. So it's basically the same thing, just on GoChain. And so back then, like, that's why we called them GoChain NFTs. It's nothing really specifically to do with do you own it, or can, that's in like, not do you own it, but can you take self-custody of it? Can you send it to OpenSea? Like, it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the way that the data is structured. Now, that being said, if you do have the token individually in your own MetaMask, then yeah, you can, that in itself self-custody, but that's not a requirement of being an NFT.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. And so like then, the thing that I'm curious about is like this happened in like December 2021 when like everything transitioned over to IMX, and it feels like only now people are getting really inquisitive and being like, oh, wait a second, like, because I even saw like the Paul Barron network, which only 3 months ago was like super bullish on Veve, was like saying that, these aren't your keys, aren't your numbos, or whatever it was that
oh yeah, that
put out. But it's like at the same time, then because I want to share with you, and maybe we can walk through it, if you don't mind. Okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just see. Can you see this or no? Can't see anything right now.
I think you have to share, and then.
Oh, there we go. So you can see this now, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy Crypto Bro goes, IMX minted NFTs have a layer 1 representation, though the Merkle tree construct, which I had no idea what the heck that meant, which provides on-chain proof and are still considered NFTs, even though they are not maybe represented as ERC 721 tokens on the mainnet. And so like then I think there was like a little bit rebuttal between, and then Javier, the guy we talked about, comes in. And he goes, well, your Mickey Mouse is recorded on a blockchain, but it would be considered, so it's still considered first on chain. And so like, what, you know what I mean? Like, just, I feel like there's a lot of different perspectives. He seemed pretty smart, but I mean, obviously, a lot too. I mean, you just walked us through the whole process. So what do you think his angle is in that?
Yeah, I know Crypto Bro. We actually talk like fairly regularly. He's actually the same guy who kind of, he's the one who initially sent me the Veve smart contract. Okay. So, yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah, he's a good developer as well. He built the like not web app, the desktop app interface for the Veve web app, and it's connected to IMX, so you can actually see live like the IMX market transactions on whilst connected to the Veve market. It's quite cool. Yeah, and then I think someone from the Veve team, the CTO, came out and said, use this at your own risk, because obviously it's like a third-party application. But yeah, like anyway, he's correct, and he's basically the whole Merkle tree thing. I didn't use that specific term because I try and avoid using.
Well, like you're breaking it down for me,
exactly,
which I appreciate.
Like, what the hell is that? So that's why I used the example of think of it as a spreadsheet, because a spreadsheet is with. Yeah, so the Merkle tree is basically the spreadsheet that I told you about. So there is a record that exists on the blockchain, but that record isn't what I showed you with like the ERC 721, where you've got a token that has its ID, that you can own it in your wallet. It's basically something that exists on the blockchain, that's everyone can look at, everyone can see, but none of us can own it. It belongs to IMX. It's just IMX's way of proving that certain events took place on a certain day.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I get you
Yeah.
now. Yeah. And so, okay, so then this begs the question then, like, let's say, okay, so that's an example. Like, let's just a simple example, like on,
Mm.
other platforms, you can then go and mint an NFT, right? Like they could be
Yeah.
like, okay, this one's now mintable. And then if you race to get on the blockchain first, you
Yeah.
technically would have the first on blockchain,
That
right? So, I
that
mean,
was the exact conversation we also had in the space because Kyle,
yeah,
because Kyle was tuned into this stuff already. Like I didn't have to explain to him. So his plan was basically the day that Vivi enables the minting is he's already got his like Todd Batman everything lined up, and he's
yeah,
gonna be the first one to smash that mint button, and then basically be like, I have the first Batman on blockchain now. Like you guys do not have it.
right.
Like I have it now. Here's the date, minted before yours. Because the way that Vivi mints them is they mint them in batches, right? And so everyone's mint date's kind of like the same basically. But in this case, it's not minted in batches, it's minted one by one. So you'd be minting one, I'd be minting one, and it comes down to who does it first. It's like faster than doing a VV drop. Like, you gotta be on it with the minting.
So this is where, I mean, this just goes into a whole other level of complication, because then it's like, okay, well, what if then Cardano is winning the day in 3 years, and then all of a sudden then it's like, well, wait, is there a bridge to get over there? I mean, it's like nonstop, right? And here's one thing I want to read to you, because this is where I feel like a lot of VV users largely are into like the fandom, into the
Mm,
comics, into these things that like they don't necessarily kind of know the back end, right? It's kind of reminds me of like an Apple product. Like, you just press
mm,
portrait mode and you take a great photo. You don't need to know how to adjust the ISO. You don't need to do like, this different
yeah.
infrared kind of bullshit. Like you just kind of like show up. And I think, and I don't know if there's like a sound in the background. Is that me, or is that your,
Oh, sorry, that's my bird.
oh, is that your
Yeah.
bird?
As everyone kind of knows, like the
I
birds
was
always make
like,
sounds, and I'm used to it, so I didn't notice it.
oh, that's
But
fine.
other
I just
people will
was worried
notice
it
it,
was
and I'm
my
like,
end.
okay, yeah, that's my bird.
Okay, I thought it was like my mic or something, but so that's interesting. So I mean, so I guess, what do you think about that, Kay? Like, is that kind of a different angle than, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many ways to approach this.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why at the end of the day, right? I say two things. Firstly, I say try not to treat it like an investment and slam your life savings into it. Actually, I wouldn't recommend that for anything in Web3 personally, right? Like
Right,
that's
right.
over leveraged, risky, irresponsible, and I've seen people do that, and it's like one of those things where it's like, yes, some people can get lucky, but most people, the large majority of people don't get lucky, and it's one of those things where every single person that gets lucky, they will show it off. They will rub it in everyone's faces. Like they will boast about it.
Yeah.
But all the people who lose, they will try and hide it. Generally speaking, right? Like if you look on Twitter, like it's so funny. Sona, he tweeted recently, and he said, why does every trader on Twitter win for some reason? Like why do they never post? Why do they never post losses? Like why is there only a few people posting losses? Um,
True.
yeah, so
True.
it's funny, right? And so this is the thing is I try and educate people in the sense of don't take what you see on Twitter at face value or social media. Like it's not representative, so don't treat things as straight up investments. I don't over leverage. So that's the first thing I would say. Yeah, don't do that, but treat it more as something of like fun, collecting, enjoy the fandom. Like look at this stuff, right? Like I don't plan on selling any of this stuff, right? This is
Right.
just literally just for me to enjoy. Like some of this stuff I actually spent quite a lot of money on. Like this one here, can't remember, it was like $150 or something for like this
It's
one
cool,
notebook.
man.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's cool. It's fun building it, and I like having it on display. I got like a bunch of these stuff. I got like some like more expensive ones. Like, oh, actually, let me see if I can pull this one down. This one's these ones were like I think $250 each. Um, yeah, so
Wow. That's a nice little
yeah,
set
these are
there,
like
eh?
really detailed. So these are from a brand called Kotobukiya. It's like a
Wow.
Japanese brand, and yeah, like they do like really detailed like statues and like
Dude, that's gorgeous. That
yeah,
Ultraman
and
looks
so
like
they come together.
realistic.
It's like from Civil
Wow.
War.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when that was one of my favorite films for Marvel too. Wow.
Yeah, Civil War had the FA Spider-Man in Marvel Universe.
Wow, that's crazy. I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. I mean, and that's the thing too that I always say to people is like, and I told you before the stream, like, I have a full job. This is like a hobby. This is like this
Mm.
always been a fun thing. I'm definitely not like trying to get rich scheme. And trust me, when everything went up parabolic, I didn't really expect it. I remember, I think I told this in the last stream, but like Sean from Comics and Crypto was like, "Yo, man,
Mm.
Spider-Man's gonna hit 100K," and I was like, "Yeah, maybe in 10 years." Like, I didn't expect it to be, 6 months, right? So, but here's what I want to say. This is the majority.
I've got a question. I've got a
Yeah.
question for you. You have a promo Yu-Gi-Oh card from that video game on your shelf.
Let me see. Which one?
At the top, next to the Star Wars and a whiskey.
Yeah, I do, bro.
Ah, I spotted that. I had the same card. Yes, it began with an S. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that
screw
one.
you.
What name? It was like, so yeah, something you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that one. I forget exactly what it was, but like a high grade of that was like 2 grand or something like that. But
Oh damn, yeah.
I just
I
found
keep
that
like
one.
Yu-Gi-Oh cards here as well. Dark Magician of Chaos. I've had this one for 20 years.
Jeez, that's crazy, man.
But I was talking to a Veve well, and he has so many first edition Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragons, like from the first set, and
I
he's
hate
got like
that guy.
100 of them. That guy, oh my god, he had over 1 billion Omi tokens. His vote was worth like over $1 million. Like he was hardcore. But yeah,
Wow.
he still like trades and flips Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Like he told me it's still lucrative. I just did it to buy, and I used to compete in tournaments. So I was a regional champion in London in 2005. So I've still got like the OG membership card to Upper Deck Entertainment. So Upper Deck Entertainment used to be like the company that kind of owned the Yu-Gi-Oh like kind of franchise here in Europe. I don't know
Wow.
if it was them in the US as well, but this was like 2005. Like I got into it like 2002. I was super every day. Every day I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh, dueling people, like super competitive. I still remember my exact deck, like the strategy I used, and like I knew the ban list off the top of my head, all the rules, everything. And now I go back to it and I'm like, what the hell? Like the game has changed. It's like every single person on the first turn does like 500 moves, whereas before
Wow.
it's like so overly complex now. Like the game, like it actually put me off like trying to learn it again. But yeah,
Wow.
like yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is like one of my like kind of favorite like pastimes.
That's amazing, man. I didn't know that you were that into it. Like I was really into Pokemon. But I have a few
Yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Pokemon
Like some
collecting, but I didn't play. I collected, but I didn't play the game. But Yu-Gi-Oh, I was hardcore into the game. Like I was competitive.
I'm
Like
gonna see if I
very.
can throw you a few more. It's gonna take me too long to find. I've got like 4 drawers, but it was like Horus the Black Dream. What is it? Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 8, the first
Oh
edition.
yes, yeah. So
The
that
the,
one I
the
remember.
most
Yeah,
like the most secret rare variant, the one that's like kind of looks like the it's kind of like folding upwards off the card is so
yeah. I know
yeah,
there was Horus level 4, Horus level 6, Horus level 8. Was it?
you got it.
At
You got it.
every start of every main phase, you could swap it out if you had fulfilled some condition. I
Damn, look
remember.
at that. Okay, we're connecting on another thing here.
Yeah,
Um,
it's weird. I remember like the effects that the cards had as well. Like it's just,
so
uh,
Kate, we got a few people in here asking, like, what do you think about like Omi right now? Because obviously, we talked about this before the stream, right? It started at when I got into the app in March 2021. It was
oh
pretty
yeah,
much at its all-time high then, and
yeah.
then it was pretty much a slow bleed till now. Like my friend got in at 0.0004, and he
Yeah.
can't even believe that we're like approaching that same point right now. And
Oh yeah.
and what do you think about like like I guess like Omi and then coupled with like the macro conditions of like
Mm,
crypto? Like what I just want to hear your thoughts because I know
yeah.
that you were invested at one point and I think you may have sold some off. I forget exactly,
Mm,
but yeah, what's your take on
yeah.
that?
Yeah. So Omi is an interesting one. This this goes back to the point of it's important for people to have context before they kind of like start pitching in, because then that's what can lead to like people arguing because there's a lack of context and misinformation, and then
Yeah.
that can help like perpetuate misinformation. So some people probably thought that I've like abandoned the token, or I was like, I've changed my sentiment towards it, like, or fudding the token, or being paid to fud the token. Like, like, there's layers to this, right?
Right.
And so what I try and do is I encourage people to have the full data, and I encourage the full data to be shared. And so what I'll do, right, is let me see if I can actually share something else,
Yeah, for
because I
sure,
think that
man.
would be really important. Let me see.
I love sharing the screen. This is so convenient. It just like helps with the engagement and like, I can see what's actually going on. So this is good. Okay,
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. So if you, oh yeah, oh cool, you got it. Perfect. Okay. So let's see.
let's back up a little bit now, which is good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically, this is kind of like what you saw, right? For the token is this is like from a year ago to now. So
Right.
what token law is, coin law, is they provide you data that before the token had an IEO. So OMI had an IEO, which was an initial exchange listing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go on Coin Market Cap, right, the data it starts from like February 2021, I think, which is the IEO date. So that's the date when people had already stacked the token, the early whales, and it had just gotten its first glimpse of like the pump, and then a week after it pumped even more, month after it pumped like 30x. So what people don't have is the data before that, the data of when these whales were stacking and what price these whales are buying at. So if we go on CoinLaw, we can actually see this is the true chart of OMI, right?
So this is what I've been looking for because I used to be able to
Yeah,
see
I can
it.
send you this. Yeah, so if you want to see the price of OMI a year before that big pump we saw here, so this was
Jeez.
February. If we go to February 2020, um, here, the price of OMI a year before that big pump, it was actually 0.0000281. So it was four zeros,
Oh
281.
my God. You imagine
So
buying in at that point?
yeah, yeah. And the volume was actually not bad that day. It was $110,000. So that's like, 1/8 of the volume now, but it was like 1/20th of the price that is now or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if people are thinking, oh, 0006, we're at the bottom. Well, look at that, the bottom is actually way lower than that.
Wow.
So when you actually then look at this chart, it's not like OMI is down. OMI is like way, way, way up, and then it's down, but there's still all of this huge gap. And because this is like it's not a log scale, so you can't really see it properly. Like it doesn't look like there's that much of a difference between here and here, but you can see, quad 4 versus 0006. That's like another 95% drop. If you were to go back to those prices, right? So that's the first thing is like people need to have all of the data, and then the other data was things like well, back when we pumped to like, back when we were here, we had a lot of token unlocks that hadn't happened. So, the founders, they hadn't had their tokens unlocked. And obviously, some of these founders, they just sold off straight away. Some of these founders, they held, some of them sold off a little bit. By founders, I mean like advising team members,
For
like,
sure. That had
yeah,
a
like
pretty
those guys.
significant
Yeah.
bag.
So that was another aspect that, obviously people need to be aware of when they kind of look at these historical prices. They need the full data, and then they also need to be aware of like events that took place, right? So one of the events that wasn't aware of, there was a whale in the community who told me later on, and because he found it funny, right? I was like, that's not kind of funny because, I bought in at that price. So he told me the day when they kind of like started to pump is around that time when OMI utility, so you could actually use OMI to buy NFTs in the app. I don't know if you were around at that point, but there were
Wow.
people, yeah. So you used to actually be able to use OMI to buy NFTs in the app, but they turned it off because the Play Store and App Store, they said that you're not allowed to use cryptocurrencies in your app, or you're not allowed to use alternative currencies. You can only use money that's purchased through the app store, like the way it works right now. And so they were forced to switch it off. Now the problem was some people had already been like sending OMI in and out of the app, and so those transactions, they were kind of like stuck or frozen. And
Yeah.
so some people and obviously OMI was like quite cheap then as well. So some people sent tons of OMI, it exploded in price, but it was kind of stuck in this limbo situation where they had to switch it off, and then they had to like unfreeze the transactions and things. So at that point, when people who had stacked tons of OMIs had their OMI frozen, because they couldn't sell into this pump, the pump just kept pumping. And so
Interesting.
at that point, that's why partly why we had this huge, really, really aggressive sell-off, because people then had access to their funds again, and then other stuff took place. And so people just look at it, they're like, oh, it was a pump and dump. But it's like, oh well, there were reasons for like this price movement, like a lot of reasons. And so now when people look back, like they need to be aware of all of the data that contribute to this price and all of the data that's affecting the price now. And so that kind of goes to the other point is one of the things that I didn't like about the project was there was too many. So there's data that you can look at on the blockchain, and there was a very low amount of wallets that held a very high amount of
I remember
tokens. So
that.
basically, there
Yeah.
were too many whales, right? And so for some projects, some people like that, right? They're like, oh, there's a few people and they're going to buy all my bags. Like, don't need to worry about other people coming in. These same people are just going to keep buying stuff. And okay, like, if that's what you care about, then fine. But that can also be a bad thing, because if one of those few people is upset and wants to start selling, or they want to, maybe they're not upset, they just want to move on, they've been in this project long enough, like they've got other stuff they want to do and they want to sell, then that's going to have a huge impact. And so, you can see that, potentially there are some people who maybe they're not happy with certain aspects of the project, or and maybe they found something else they want to be involved in, they start selling, but because there's no liquidity, they don't want to crash the market, so they end up having to sell over a long period of time, like maybe they've got like bots that sell a few million every hour or something like that, because some of these guys they got like multiple billions of tokens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to take that can take months to sell, not even months. By months I mean like probably over 6 months. So
So my question to you, like, I mean, and I appreciate this, like,
oh
like I
yeah.
said to you before, the technical analysis you do is so good, man. But like, so when I think about this, right, like
Mm.
before like the token even pumped, right, there was not really many people other than those advisors that were even aware of it.
Yeah.
But there's still a pretty, not maybe a big community anymore, but
Yeah.
still a significant of enough
Mm.
community potentially like holding on to a certain amount of that market cap. But
Oh yeah.
but how do you see that playing out potentially over the next few years? Because I've heard different takes. Like I hear people saying, though, the next bull cycle might be like the Bitcoin halving, or other people are saying, well, it might actually extend because now it looks like the mainstream media is really dropping the hammer on crypto and they're trying to regulate everything. And obviously, inflation's at an all-time high. World war might break out.
Yeah.
So like I guess just in your own opinion, like where do you kind of, do you think it's going to have a resurgence at some point? Like what if all those things we talked about, like what if all of a sudden like IMX as an example is like, what, like there's going to be now the capability for you to move these digital assets around, you'll be able to have some kind of gamification in the future. Maybe the Viviverse is really good. Like, do you see that being a part of Vivi's story? Maybe not now, but in like 3-4 years. Like, I just want to know, you know what I mean, with all that
Yeah. Yeah.
context, what your thoughts are.
100%. I feel like that is kind of where it's going to go, right?
Yeah.
Like you can see the function for minting to layer 1 Ethereum is there in the VV contract. I mean, it's kind of always there by default anyway, but
Yeah.
it's there, like, so they can do it. And a lot of the artists, they want to go interoperable, so it's just a matter of I suspect it's more to do with the royalty aspect. Try like having
I remember that.
deploying in the right way so
Yeah.
that the royalties can continue to be enforced. I think they're kind of really deciding on the best solution for that. That's not the reason that they've given publicly, but I suspect that is probably the reason, because it feels like a lot of the licensors do want to go interoperable. But on the token side of things, like again, like I had to deleverage, and that's not necessarily. I mean, okay, it is partly to do with the team, not like I don't like the team or anything, but more so to do with, I think people trust the team's deadlines and timelines to the T. And
Yeah.
I've always told people, whatever the team says, add an extra quarter to it at least. And
Right.
that's again like not FUD to them. It's just I work in development, I work in tech, and I know kind of the process, and I know what can go wrong. And I look for certain flags and markers from the team, certain things, certain behaviors, and when I see those flags get raised, then I'll be like, I think this is going to be delayed. And then,
Right.
I have to act accordingly, because the other aspect is, and I made a video about this 8 months ago, where I was basically, I gave people, it was kind of interesting because it played out exactly like in that video. It
Wow.
was that video where it was a bit clickbaity, where I was like, I'm selling all my Veve Nfts, but it was, I was selling other stuff as well, like not just
Yeah.
Veve stuff, because I explained to people that, firstly, I think the financial markets are being absolutely obliterated, in 2023, which, we kind of start to see, hey, the markets are not looking very good. Everything's kind of going down. But then two, it was like, from my experience in crypto, because I was in the very big cycle of 2017, 2018.
Wow.
And my experience of crypto was, at the time, it was very similar to how NFTs are now, where it was a new novel asset that people were adopting. And we went through this cycle where everything pumped ridiculously, and then everything just pretty much went to zero.
Wow.
And then some things that were decent, they survived and they came back, like Cardano, for example. I got into Cardano ICO stage. I held that to the top, I held that to the bottom, and then I sold it kind of a little bit above the bottom, and then it pumped again. So, like that kind of stuff, right? People need to be aware that NFTs are similar to what cryptos were in 2016, 2017. That's how I feel anyway. And so because they're a heavily risk on asset, any dip in the, let's say, the S&P 500, for example, let's say it dips 50%, because I've been speaking to, and this is another topic, but I've been heavily involved in very knowledgeable, well-proven, credible market makers and traders, and these guys, like people have, literally have been given tens of millions of dollars to manage, right? And all of them have shown me various different models and charts and things, and it's kind of confirmed my bias that, yeah, I'm bearish on the market, financial markets in the world overall. And so if the S&P 500 drops 50%, historically Bitcoin always ends up dropping twice as hard.
Right.
And if Bitcoin drops twice as hard, all the risk on assets that are coupled to Bitcoin or affected by Bitcoin, those end up dropping 2 to 3 times as hard. So if S&P drops 50%, Bitcoin's going to drop like 70%. Your altcoins are going to drop like 90%, and your NFTs are probably going to drop like even harder than that, like 95%. And so that's what I wanted to avoid. Is I was like, the risk to reward, the risk is now way too high. Like, I need to liquidate as much as I can of everything. Which is weird because I was still buying actually quite a bit of OMI, and then I sold off a bit. And then I was like, yeah, like I'm in a position where whatever happens, if everything pumps again and I was wrong, congratulations to everyone. Like, I'm happy for you, but I'm in a position where at least I'm not losing money. But if everything dips, fantastic. I mean, obviously not fantastic for people losing money, but fantastic for me. I'm now liquid. And if I'm liquid in a bear market, that's like one of the best positions to be in. You can go shopping, like you can buy stuff at massive discount. Like
you're nimble, you're agile, right?
Exactly. You can do what you want. And that's kind of like the position I want to be in, because if I held everything and it went to the bottom and everyone's fighting for liquidity, because if you look in the Veve market, for example, I don't know if you looked at the Waltz, for example.
Oh yeah.
Like I Help Society was trying to sell a Walt, and he's actually a pretty nice guy. Like I know he trolls a lot and makes fun of people.
He's a great guy. I love that. Yeah,
he's actually a nice guy. Like, if you know him, right? And so I was like, I'll shout it out for you, like, because he's trying to basically liquidate, and basically, like I said, he's one of the people who just wants to move on now. And so I shouted out, and the moment I shouted out, like 5 people undercut his Walt, and his Walt was listed on the floor, and then 5 more got listed below him on the floor. And it's like people are fighting for liquidity now, and I'm like, I do not want to be in that position. And so I made the move, and I made a video about it 8 months ago, explained to everyone, this is what the markets look like, here's the data, here's what I've been shown. The rates are going to be going up because it's not in line to counteract inflation yet. So historically, they've always raised rates, and this is the impact it has on things like mortgage-backed securities, things like people's ability to mortgage and then going delinquent. And then when they go delinquent, what's that going to do on disposable income? Like, all these things are linked together. And I basically broke it down kind of like, how I broke down the other stuff. And a lot of people were very appreciative. And that's what I like is, like, I know there are some haters who are just like, oh, you're just flooding the markets. Okay, fine. Yeah. That's fine. But there are some people like, oh, you know what, like this is all connected, like the information's there, let me research it, the context is there, makes sense. You know what, I'm gonna look into my options and think, oh, maybe I should deleverage a bit, like maybe I should take some risk, some chips off the table. And fortunately this time, because I'm not obviously I'm not, again, like I said on Twitter, every single trader is right 100% of the time, but I'm happy sharing my losses. Like, I'm not right 100% of the time, but in this instance, it played out like perfectly. And so I'm like, okay, now what's the next move? I'm liquid. I can just carry on waiting, wait for that big dip and then go shopping. So yeah, I'm like my plan's kind of like halfway through now, but yeah, that's like the important side of it.
I see. I love that, like how you brought that up, and again, like especially speaking of those macroeconomic conditions, because even despite, let's say, another coin that you might be super interested in, just the fundamentals of the macro environment wouldn't necessarily make that coin, go parabolic because there's just not enough supporting it at that point. So I mean,
yeah,
and that's what I've always said. Like, man, like even for me now, I've been collecting sets. As before, I was always just like flipping and flipping, as you know. And I'm like, man, I'm seeing the value go down all the time. And I'm like, well, I guess I own it, but I'm really hoping that like I'm going to get some kind of incentive to get like whitelisted for a drop or whatever, but it's not happening. So it is difficult just to watch that from the initial price point, go down. And I'm not used to it because I'm used to just flipping. But then I'm like, oh, well, maybe the MCP is going to have some, some impact there. But, there's just, it's a smart thing, man. I think, but at the same time, like you saw in the last crypto bear market, is that if you were liquid and then put in $50,000 into something,
you would have been a millionaire, like on any decent
exactly
coin that survived. You could have probably made, yeah, like any decent coin, like in that last bear market of 2018. You
right.
just bought even Neo, and I think Neo is a bit of a dead coin, but people still trade it. If you bought Neo at like $2 a pop, like you still made like 20x of that. No, like 40x of that in like the last bull run.
Right.
Easy.
And then I guess like, I know we're getting a little bit wider in scope, but like this is where I get interested now because, a lot of people are just presuming that history is just going to repeat itself, right? Oh, we're going to have the next bull cycle. But like at the same time, Bitcoin, it dropped down, but it didn't go as low as the 14,000 that people were saying. And I'm like, it's getting more heavily adopted. And not to say it's ever going to be like the stock market, at least anytime soon, but it's starting to get more hands are holding it. And then there's more coins created. There's more NFTs now. There's a lot more saturation. And so it's not like before when you had a huge amount of people with a small proportion of things to buy. Now it's kind of, there's a lot of things to choose from. So the guessing game might not be as it used to be where you could just kind of close your eyes like we saw in the last bull market.
Yeah.
Like any DeFi coin that came out, it was like fucking instant 10x,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly. I mean, that's the other interesting thing, right? Is that last bull run, you have to like also understand the factors that contribute to it. So because we were going through COVID, there was basically a lot of money being given out, and the statistics, I believe, it was apparently 15% of all stimulus check money went into crypto in the US. 15%. So basically, like people just went full on DJ, and it wasn't just crypto, right? Like a lot of people, Pokemon cards price of those went up like during COVID because people who kind of like that stimulus check money basically went to everyone, right? So some people, they didn't really need it. But so they're like, oh, you know what? I've got some disposable income. Let me just go buy some nice stuff for myself. And also, I'm stuck at home, and so more people were spending time browsing the internet. And when you browse the internet, you know how ads work; they just slam you with things to buy. And so people just started. And that's kind of why that's why I did as well. Like I was in COVID and I was buying stuff. Like I was just like I'm at home like browsing eBay and things. Like all these online websites. I'm just buying stuff that I probably don't need, but it's like it is what it is. And so. Yeah.
Interesting, because nobody's talking about that. Like nobody's talking about how like COVID was a huge incentive to us getting into crypto, to getting back into collectibles. All this stuff popped up, like you said, and now people are out traveling again. I was recently in the Caribbean, and I literally saw a guy in the back of my taxi that was throwing rocks at dogs. And he was just like, and I'm like, man, I'm like thinking about augmented reality glasses, and I'm like, we got such a long way to go. And that's no shame about this is a different country than what what we're in right now, but I'm just saying like there was just, it was interesting for me because I was like, oh wow, we're really kind of getting back into this physical world as we were really in the digital for a few years there pretty heavily.
Yeah, no, 100% right. And I think just on the contrarian side of that statement, so we also have to acknowledge that Bitcoin hasn't been through a major global recession yet. So that's the other aspect, like in its current adopted state. So in the hypothetical situation, looking at how Bitcoin performed when the stock market dipped, how much more Bitcoin dipped on top. If we do go through a global financial crisis, which it is looking more likely, how will it perform now? Will it perform similarly to how it did in the past and it'll be all okay by the time of the halvening? Or will the halvening's effect be kind of dwarfed by the effect of a global financial market crash. So we don't know yet. So this is why we're kind of there is more data now than we had in the past, but at the same time, there's kind of like less data for the scenario that we're in, and so we're still a bit in the dark. So it can go either way. But um, I do believe the halvening it is probably going to put Bitcoin higher than it is right now.
Yeah.
But I think we can certainly go a lot lower than we are right now. A lot of people think, oh, the Bitcoin bull market is here. We ain't going to go back below 25K and 20K. Like that's very, very on the table still.
Super interesting, man. And so this is where I'm curious because everybody's like, oh, well, Bitcoin's, a hedge against inflation. And
Mm.
and when the mainstream media kept pushing, like, I forget what it was, but it was like some bank in the States, like, was it like
Silicon
somewhere in
Valley Bank.
California? Yeah, Silicon Valley, right? That's in California. And then
Yeah.
everybody all of a sudden, like, Bitcoin went up like 5 or 6 thousand, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this is interesting because even in Argentina now, we got like friggin' Venezuela that their money's completely depleted. Cyprus,
Mm.
there's so many places where I'm like, this is South Africa. Like, you're seeing the inflation like surpass 100% in a
Yeah.
lot of areas. Even in Canada, we're at like 14.5% for like food
Mm.
items. Like, so like my point is, like, do you think that there would be enough of a movement to potentially like kind of go head over heels into something like that? Or do you think naturally people would just be like, listen, I got fucking mortgage payment, I've got kids to feed, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have 40 grand to put into Bitcoin.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
right.
I think
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say I think there's gonna be it's kind of like how when inflation goes up, like you then increase you increase rates, right? But then it's like a counterbalancing effect. So it's interesting because I think what's gonna happen is like you said, a lot of people are gonna have, less disposable income to put into Bitcoin. Many
Right.
people are gonna be selling Bitcoin to, pay their bills and pay their rent. But at the same time, Bitcoin becomes more attractive because of the inflation itself. And so what I suspect is going to happen, which is kind of happening, is the whole concept of like CBDCs, centralized bank
Yeah.
currency. So I think a lot of countries already they're implementing it, or they're trying to implement it. Like in the UK, they're already hiring like a head of CBDCs to create the Brit coin, British coin. But yeah, like they're already trying to do, and I think the US is already looking at it. Like there's something called Fed Now, like a
Mm.
federal bank CBDC, and like it is actually happening, right? So CBDCs are going to be like the way of controlling inflation, and also controlling literally citizens and the way they spend, and like the whole social credit structure as well. Like that's all going to be very heavily controlled. So what's going to
Yeah.
happen is you're going to then start to get a bit more of a black market where people are going to look towards the decentralized assets, not centralized assets. So I think initially we're going to have a huge dip in Bitcoin because the CBDCs are going to kind of come in. People can't afford it because they can't afford things in general. And then once that kind of economy stabilizes, and then people then start to look at, oh, I don't like being controlled, or whatnot. Then the Bitcoin kind of market then will start to really take off, and that has been proven already in when government control kicks in and that Bitcoin market opens up. So I don't know if you've heard of something called kimchi premium.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's a really funny one, and it happened in Nigeria as well, right? But I don't know if they've got a name like that. So kimchi premium, it's kimchi because it occurs in South Korea, and so what happens is, in order for you to buy Bitcoin in South Korea, you need to be a South Korean citizen because the exchanges you have to have a South Korean ID,
I see.
and so whenever the government does something silly, like overly controlling and things like that, the price of Bitcoin tends to go up in South Korea.
Mhm.
So it can actually go up to the point where there's a significant price difference in South Korea and like other exchanges, right? And so like exchanges that you and I might use. So what can happen is this difference in price creates an opportunity for arbitrage. So what you would do, right, is you would call up your friend in South Korea, and you'd be so let's use Daniel Lee as an example. Let's because he is Korean. You'd call up Daniel Lee in South Korea, and you'd be like, Daniel Lee, I'm gonna buy some Bitcoin for 25K, and I'm gonna send it to you. Can you sell it in South Korea for 30K? And he'll be like, okay. And then you send it to him. You pay 25K. He sells it for 30K, and you're like, okay, Daniel Lee, keep 10%. Send me the other 9% of profit.
Right.
He sends
Right.
it back to you. You take, I don't know. Now you've got like 28K. you buy more 28K worth of Bitcoin. You call back Daniel Lee back. I mean, Daniel Lee, I'm going to send you 28K worth of Bitcoin. Can you sell it for whatever it's going for in South Korea? So, and you just keep doing it back and back. And my friend, he just took like a whole week of work. This last cycle in 2021, he took a whole week of work, whole week off of work, and he basically made £20,000, which is like, I don't know, 20.
Yeah, it's like 45 grand my money right there.
Oh, Canada, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So like 40 grand Canadian or whatever, right? And he made that in a week, just literally back and forth. He's Korean, but he doesn't have a South Korean ID. He's got a friend in South Korea with South Korea. And Nigeria, exact same thing. There was like a 20, I think it was a 20% difference. So if you had a Nigerian friend with Nigerian ID, you could do arbitrage all day long, and you keep doing it until eventually the price like stabilizes. Kimchi Premium used to be like, the gaps were quite big in the past. People used to make stupid money, and it's very low risk as well, because the only risk is literally the difference in the forex conversion from Korean to your currency. That might change a little bit, but chances are you're not really going to lose much money through that. Like, you're going to make way more because of the difference in Bitcoin between the exchange there and the exchange where you are. And so that's like one of the things that could start to pop up again as governments start to impose more control. Because in Nigeria, they blocked you from withdrawing money from your bank account. Like, you'd only withdraw, I don't know, maximum $100 a week, and people are like, nah,
I remember that. I saw that. And then
that's why you had this Nigerian premium. I don't know what the name of it is, like Kimchi Premium, but
interesting.
Nigerian premium.
And so it's interesting because it's obviously that was a blockade for people doing what you're talking about, this trading, but there's other people that just needed it to survive, right? And I mean, that's where it gets complicated. And so I'm really interested in this because, recently I was like, thinking more about where this is all going to go. And one thing that scares me about more, control and security and all that stuff is like, eventually, you might want to go on a traveling trip, let's just say, and they'd be like, sorry, you already burned your carbon footprint this year. Like, you can't even buy that plane ticket.
100%. Yep.
Right. And I mean, this is where shit's going to hit the fan, because you got these private billionaires, flying across the world 100 times over. And, we can't even go on 2 trips a year because, again, you have to measure your carbon footprint, as an example of all the other things.
Already do that. Like, companies have a fixed amount of carbon credits, and Tesla, is it Tesla? I think it's Tesla. I think it might be Tesla, but one company, they don't generate much CO2, so they sell their carbon credits to other companies, so you can buy carbon credits. Like, that's what Immutable X does. Like, they have a little bit of carbon footprint, and they'll buy it to offset the remaining amount. So they're basically carbon neutral, right?
Wow. That, like you said, that's how they get that technicality, right? It's like,
so maybe it could create like a weird gig economy where I choose not to travel, and so I will sell you my carbon credits, and so then you can go travel. Like, could be a weird economy.
But it's so weird to me because it's like, and the macro conditions, like China's responsible for like 40% of literally the carbon emissions, and they're like this huge manufacturing powerhouse. And if Canada literally ceased to do anything, we would only have a 1% impact on the global carbon reduction. And it's like, okay, well, at that point, the real issue is like manufacturing, and like factories. And so I guess like that's the issue that becomes difficult. And I think that's what we're seeing at like the macro level now, is that a lot of these systems are being put in place to stop these minor things from happening, but it's really affecting the majority of people. And that's where I just find, like, even with like, everything that's happening with inflation right now, just seeing so many people that, man, like, I get calls all the time. I should have sold my Secure Spider-Man at 100,000. It's worth 5,000 now. And all these things. I'm like, man, this is a market cycle for you. And it's a good lesson for everybody, right? For the next one, not because I'll be honest, when everything was booming, I don't know how you felt, but I was like, well, it's just going to keep going.
That's the thing. I made that mistake first time around, because I wasn't just new to crypto. I was new to investing. It was 2016, right? I hadn't really bought any stocks before. It's a funny story, right? Like, I used to do like competitive breakdancing as well, and then
really?
There's a guy who used to be like the DJ at events and stuff. He's quite well known. His name's DJ Renegade. He's like he's the DJ at like Red Bull BC1, which is like the international breakdancing competitions. But yeah, basically people don't know, but he graduated, and like, he doesn't look like it. He looks like a typical, like, street thug. Like, he wears like, snapback caps, like, vests and things. But he's a physics graduate, and he worked in like Deloitte for like many years, like in consulting. So he's incredibly intelligent, and he just randomly kept mentioning, it was 2016, he kept telling people Bitcoin's at like £300, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. I'm like, I ain't spending £300 for this internet money.
Right.
This is going to go to zero. And so I ignored it. And then I saw it like a few months later and it went to £500. And then I was like, okay, why are people buying this? And then so kind of like middle of 2016, I started buying some.
Wow.
And I was like, you could buy half a Bitcoin for £250. Like, it's dirt cheap compared to now, right? And
Totally,
so I
dude.
bought some and then I was like, okay, I'm I didn't look at the charts really because I didn't know how to read charts. I didn't understand what I was like, the fundamentals of what I was buying. I was just like, price number goes up, I will buy it and I'll keep buying it. That's literally all I
Wow.
saw. And so I went through that cycle where everything pumped and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I was already like thinking of retirement plans and things. I was like, yeah, let's go. And then kind of end of January 2018, everything tanked. And then I was like, oh, I wish I sold. I wish I sold. And my friend, it's so funny, like a good friend of mine, like he bought a token called Nano and he put in like a few £100 and it was worth £100,000 and he did not sell anything and he rode it to the bottom. And
Oh,
he told me he was so depressed because he was a university student, like, that was life-changing money for him. I mean, £100,000 is a lot of money, to be honest.
yeah, it is.
And so like it was crazy. And yeah, to this day, I think he's still kind of depressed about it, but it did motivate him. He like worked really hard. He learned more about crypto. It's funny because he's one of the lead smart contract developers for Amazon's NFT marketplace. So he gave me the alpha like way before
Oh
like
my God. I was gonna say you're probably getting the intel. I'm gonna have to
yeah
give you a
yeah because he was like
yeah.
because he was already working at Amazon in the Prime Services team, and then he just randomly mentioned to me like AWS blockchain is like this brand new team, and I spoke to one of the guys who like works there in Silicon Valley, so in San Francisco, and he was like, should I interview for this position? And I was like, yeah, sure, do it. And when he interviewed for it, he told me that the guy interviewing him said that my friend knew more about smart contract development than the guy interviewing him, and so he's like, I think it went well. And then they basically said they wanted him to move to California
Wow.
because he's from London, and so he was like, how much money should I ask for? Because I was like, just throw in like a random high figure, and they'll probably negotiate it down. And he said something stupid like 400K, like
Wow.
dollars. And they just said okay, and I was like, "What the hell? Why'd they agree to that?" Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's a very like novel thing. And apparently, he told me for that position, there were only two other people that they interviewed because only two other people apart from him recruiting globally were even suitable to fill that spot. And the other two people were already doing similar roles in San Francisco already. One was at Google, the other one was, I don't know, some hedge fund or something.
Wow.
But yeah, like it was interesting. So yeah, like that whole experience of like, I like digress there, but yeah, that whole experience of like, experiencing the market high, experiencing the market down, like that kind of then motivated me this time round to block out the noise because you know what, like this is the thing, if you're someone who's bullish on something and the moment you sell even one of that thing, you're going to get called the paper hand, the pumper and
True.
dumper, all that stuff. And it's like I put out a video explaining everything before I even like before I even sell everything. And it's like you have plenty of time if you want to deleverage. I'm deleveraging because I know where this market's going. And so yeah, it's like interesting because this time round, from my experience last time, I'm like, yeah, I do not want to be in that same position again. I've held to zero and I'm not holding to zero again. No, not to say that I feel VVD is going to go to zero, but you never know with crypto and Web3, weird things happen. And so it's like, yeah, I'm glad I liquidated. Looking back now, I'm like really glad because right now I'd probably be depressed if I didn't.
So I love your take there, man. And I mean, I think that's where it becomes interesting because even for me, like, I had a multiple kind of sell-off periods and that helped pay for a bunch of things. And I think that's where I was kind of like, okay, well, this has always been kind of a fun, risky kind of opportunity to begin with. Not to say that I don't believe in the future of this space and where
Mm,
it's going to go, but I think it's also like you said, it's important to know what your leverage balance is. Like if I'm a big time billionaire, then I throw in 20 million into Vivi. Like
oh
who
yeah,
cares, right? But I mean, when it's actually significant, where I'm like, oh, this is actually going to help my family out, then of course that's going to be money that I'm going to want to use. You know what I mean? So I think it's like relative. And what's interesting to me too is like I always thought like, oh, if somebody smart was going to do something, then I would follow what they're doing. But I'm like, just stick to what you know. Like I know collectibles because I've collected my whole life. So I'm like,
Exactly.
okay, so I'm gonna go on Veve and I'm gonna capitalize on that market. I'm not gonna go invest into different DeFi coins because I hardly understand what the fuck that's going on. I'm not
Oh
a
yeah,
software
of
engineer.
course.
So you know what I mean? I think that's why it's interesting. Is like so kind of what you're saying is like, you know, you learned all these different skills, you understood what the last bull market did, and then you adjusted accordingly now, right? So that's cool, man.
I mean, that goes
Thank you,
back to the
Bill.
thing I Oh, cheers for the donation. That's a
Yeah.
that covers an hour at the bartending job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say that that goes back to the thing that I spoke to you about before, where, you know, like I said, I really like talking to people who are hardworking and like motivated in some skill, because you're going to learn stuff that I don't know. And, you know, like that's good because then I can talk to you about that kind of thing. And so, you know, it's like, it's good to focus on what you're good at, but try and keep your like circle of people like very diverse, very open. Because this is one thing I encourage, right? Is and it's happened to me, right? Is you know, if you have a difference of opinion, some people they're fine with it. Like, you know, it's a conversation. You're adults. Some people get very offended because you don't have a differing opinion, and so they'll like get really angry. They'll block you, or they'll block everyone with a differing opinion. And so what ends up happening is you only have like one type of person in your circle, and it's always reinforces one viewpoint, and so you end up always missing like other viewpoints because you just don't keep those
Mm.
people in your circle, and that ends up fostering like a very negative, like not a growth mindset, right? Um,
Buddy, this is why you're here right now. You know what I mean? I wanted to learn from you. It's like you said, it's
yeah,
important not to be selective in terms of how you want to approach things. I'm like, let's just open it up to everybody. Let's have a
yeah,
conversation, and let's and again, like, you know, you can have your opinion, I can have my opinion. We might see things differently, but we're conversing and we're learning, right? I mean,
exactly.
maybe I'm learning, you're not, but you know what I'm trying to say. And Vivi just popped in, by the way. They said, "What's up,
Hey,
man?"
what's up, Ryan?
That's really
What's up,
cool.
baby?
Thanks for popping in, Vivi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's very, very important to keep that discourse open. That's why I generally don't like, you know, block out people with differing opinions to myself, because I find it interesting. Because my I think people, and this is the other thing, is people maybe think that I'm someone who, you know, I've like changed my stance on like something I believed in. Like, it's no,
Mm.
because I've kept my circle of people open. And to be honest, a lot of these people who I disagreed with heavily back in the past, like now I tend to agree with a lot of things on them, because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you know what? Like I didn't do enough research into like some of the things you pointed out. Javier Torres, for example, I used to always disagree with him. I used to always
Right.
disagree with him. But now it's like, oh, like you know, you were a bit of a visionary back then. Like, yeah, you know, a bit. You came
Yeah.
across as a bit controversial, but like, yeah, I can see like why you said those things and why you say the things you say now. Like, some of the stuff I agree with you on, and that's cool. So yeah, like, you know that phrase, "Your network is your net worth."
Yep.
I try and like keep like a, you know, diverse group of people around me, but even within the closer inner circle, I try and keep as many successful people who are successful in various different aspects. Like, you know, it could be successful in trading, successful in tech,
Right.
and I just try and like, you know, learn off of them. And you know, my friend, for example, wannabe champ, I think you might remember him. He
Oh
was like,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, OG guy. Um, he recently joined the Coin Bureau team, so now he runs the Coin Bureau trading channel. And so
Wow.
yeah, it's really, really cool. Funny story, right? Is because we didn't like make it public, but Coin Bureau did a they covered Ecomi back in the day, right? And that was purely mostly because of him. Like, we kind of did it together. So we like, because we were covering Omi on our YouTube channels all the time, and we
Hmm.
knew the Coin Bureau team in real life. And so they were curious because they're like, "What's this token you keep covering in all your YouTube videos?" And so they looked into it, and then one of the editors, his name's Filippo, he basically got the full rundown on what Ecomi was, and then he wrote an article about it. And man, that article like kind of went viral. Like, you know, all the VB community were sharing it. They're like, "Oh my god, Coin Bureau covered us! Like, best YouTube
I remember
channel on
that. I remember
crypto." Yeah,
that.
yeah, like that kind of stuff went viral, and that was all because it was done by mostly wannabe champ and partly myself. Like, it was community done. It wasn't the company in that case. And so
Interesting.
yeah, so it's like really interesting stuff, and those are the type of people that I keep in my circle, because they've got like, you know, they are successful in ways where it could be like, you know, through I don't know, generating wealth, forming connections, through, you know, something to do with tech, you know, like technical connections and all of that stuff. So I think it's very, very important. Like, if you want to succeed in just general life, like, try and not to be, you know, someone who focuses on just like reinforces one viewpoint, like confirmation bias, like they call it.
Yeah.
Try and keep a diverse network of individuals, and also within that diverse network of individuals, try and talk as much as you can to those who you can see are clearly very successful. And eventually, if he said, Wannabe Champ told me this like a couple of years ago, he's like, if all of your friends are millionaires and you're not a millionaire, eventually you'll be a millionaire. Like,
Right.
it is that how it works.
I love that. And I mean, it's interesting that you say that because I mean, there's a few things that I want to take away. The first thing is like, you know, I agree about the echo chambers and like kind of, you know, beating a dead horse, like all these things you see these people where it's like, you know, something was working, it's not now, but they can't figure it, they can't escape it. It's like a perpetual death cycle, right?
Yeah.
And then the contrasting to that, like what you said, which about your friend groups, like, I mean, man, the only reason like we bought houses or got better jobs is because all our friends were doing that. And we're like, oh shit, I got to get this now to keep up, right? It wasn't really, but then you look back, you're like, oh, thank God I made that decision. But I wasn't really me making that decision. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing on this. Like, I got a lot of advisors in Veve that like whales and people that are really smart. And I'm like, well, what are you up to? What are you collecting? And then it's like, right? And then you think it's your own viewpoint, but really it's just a accumulation of everybody you talk to.
They say your personality is basically an amalgamation of the top 5 people you spend the most time with. It's interesting.
Wow, that is interesting. That makes a lot of sense, to be honest, man.
That's why your personality can be dynamic. It can change over time, depending on, you know, who you associate with. You know, the top 5 people you hang out with are, I don't know, like street thugs. You're probably gonna be a street thug. You know.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. But man, like I said, I've always been like a big fan of you, and I know you're doing like a lot of other things in the Web3 space as well. You know, like not just, obviously I knew you were in Veve for a bit, but I mean you're in so many other different projects, and then you were starting your own project, and I mean you're also a software engineer in the day. Like, is that like, you just maybe give us a little bit of a rundown on everything else that you're up to?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I should get tested. I think I've got ADHD or something. Like, you know, I'm like, I sort between tasks like all the time. So, you know, like recently, so I would say, okay, so I was in Japan in December. I met up with Mr. Fat Booty, one of the guys in the community, like such a cool guy. And since I came back from January, like I had like this, you know, kind of like like a kind of a New Year's resolution, kind of like one of those like turning points. Like, oh, you know, I want to do something good this year. So since then, I've been very heavily involved with. There's another guy in the community called God's Entry. Like, that guy's a very, very, very like successful. You call him a trader. He's like a very good person with charts and, you know, managing money basically. And yeah, he mentioned in a stream I did with him last week, his Veve vote, even in this bear market, is still worth like 400k. So in the bull run, it was worth a lot. He's got tons of low mints and things like that, mostly comic books. Like, he's like, oh, yeah, even if I want to sell, I can't sell it. There's no money there, so I'm just holding it for the, you know, for the next bull run. You never know. So yeah, he's a cool guy, and so he helped me a lot with like trading, and then. There's another guy called Ron BTC. Crypto Ghost is his Twitter tag. You know, he made so much money from trading OMI, and I was curious to learn how. And he showed me how he was arbitraging it. Like, it's really, really cool stuff. And there's another guy called John's Crypto Therapy who did like OMI technical analysis videos. Like, they're really, really good, but he doesn't have, like, he's not that well known. But his videos are extremely good. And then like you know, other people, Omi the Clown and I, like, you definitely know him. Like, we talk like every day, because we talk about like, you know, like tech stuff. And then there's another guy called Dan Kern, and like I can go on forever. But yeah, basically like this year I've been focusing more on, you know, becoming really, really consistent with trading and upskilling myself when it comes to tech around Web3 and kind of just general you know, like good technical practice basically. So that's why, you know, for example, I've been writing smart contracts, you know, I've been researching smart contracts, you know, understanding exploits, like, you know, what went wrong in that contract to cause an exploit, how do you prevent it, That's kind of like why I brought the VV smart contract, because I was curious to
Yeah.
read like what that one's
So
about.
cool.
And so yeah, like I'm happy to like always like answer questions and share the info and get the context. But yeah, like this year is kind of more of a year of building skill. Okay, so I'll give you the exact quote. So God's entry, he said to me, what he wants to help people to do is build skills that they can use to take advantage of in the next bull run. And so those skills in his area are charting. So next bull run, you will know when you're near the top because you trust your ability of charting correctly, understanding price action, understanding, the cycle. You will know the discipline and the that kind of mentality, the psychology where to take your profits, secure your initial risk. You don't just buy something at one price and hold forever and then hold it forever all the way back down again, which is what I've done in the past. Other people, I see them still do that. You kind of know when to enter, when to exit roughly. Like, you're obviously not going to time it perfectly. If you time it perfectly, fantastic. But, like just that right kind of mentality and psychology, because once you develop that risk management, and I've noticed that it helps you outside of trading, it helps you in life. Because, for example, right, if I was to go out and if I was to buy a house, for example, a lot of people, they do this thing where they buy the most expensive house that they can afford, and like literally they barely just affording the mortgage. If rates go up a little bit, bam, like what are you going to do now? You can't pay your mortgage. You have to get, then you go become delinquent, and then you go homeless, and you have to downsize and pay the
Right.
fees, and it's horrible, right? Whereas if you develop a very risk managed life set, you're like, okay, if rates potentially could go up like this percent, I obviously don't want to over leverage on a house. So what's the minimum like house I can afford without like over leveraging and affording what I want to afford and still having money to invest in other stuff? Like that mindset is like what I think people should aim to develop, so that they basically they just don't end up going through that phase where they're depressed because they've lost money. Because I've seen it with like people suiciding because of FTX, and
I saw that,
people having
man.
divorces because of FTX. Some guy would be like, "Oh, I invested my wife's money like in FTX. Like, what do I do? She's gonna find out I lost all the money." It's like Sam Bankman Fried. I'm coming after this guy. Like, it's like you want to avoid that, right? So that's the way that I kind of look at it. Like that's what I'm focusing on this year. Just heavily kind of tech upskilling, financial literacy, consistent trading. And on Twitter, I post like my daily trades. So they're all there. You can see the wins and the losses, consistency. It's about being consistent. Like, if you can make 1% every week, that's pretty good. Like,
Right.
compound per year, like you made a good amount.
And it's amazing that you're also transparent enough to kind of show all that. Like, you know what I mean? Just like you said, it's not just showing the good side of everything. And it's what's cool about, I find, this space is guys like you, where you're telling me you've got all this time to do all these different things and grow on yourself, where most people don't have that opportunity. They're working their 9 to 5s, they get back, they right. And I find a lot of people that I met in this space are like touring the world, that have done so well in crypto, that they're just chilling off the money that they made in the last bull cycle or even the one previous,
Yeah.
and even made and then doubled it all in the last one. So it's interesting, right? Like, and I find like, man, like even for some of these people now getting jobs like in AI and stuff like that, like that's really the next field, man. And I mean, I know we've been talking for an hour 23 minutes here, but like, before we go, any thoughts around like AI and how that's going to like impact the space
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually spoke about that today as well in that same space. It was like a completely weird topic. It was the context of that topic was apparently Paul Barron on his Twitter channel, he changed the banner of it, and he's basically removed a few brands that were on there on his Twitter banner that were related to the guys from Animoca, and people were speculating why did he do that, because it's so funny, like some of the speculation they tie to things, because someone mentioned I don't know if you saw Paul Barron's like recent video where he had William Quigley on
I
the
didn't see that
wax
one.
guy.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I did see
yeah,
that.
yeah. The
Yeah.
wax guy, like, yeah, that guy is top tier fodder. Like,
He's top tier, man. He's
he's
like,
top
these are
tier.
corporate NFTs. These mean nothing.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
Like
all
he's
right, get out of
like
here.
that's an example where I'm like, you're not really giving any context. You're making these claims that don't have any
Yeah.
supporting evidence. Like, like for those statements, you got to provide like context and evidence, right?
Yeah.
And so I was watching that, right, and then there were people obviously upset by his statements, and so people were basically making these weird links where they're like, Animoca Brands is a partner of like, Paul Barron Network. Animoca Brands, they're invested in Quid, and you know where this is going whenever it's Quid involved. They're like, okay, so Quid is definitely paying Kyle Wilson and Paul Barron to post this video, but it's like this really weird, stretched out connection that they're trying to make, and then they're like, okay, 100% guaranteed. Kyle and Paul are paid by Quid to make this video to fund Veve. Like that's the outcome they got from it, right? And so it was funny because I think Paul Barron, I didn't speculate. I was like, you know what? He probably thought as, why don't I just remove the Animoca and Yatsu and all that stuff from the banner? Maybe he wanted to update his banner anyway. And the worst thing that can happen is, probably nothing. It's just a bit of effort to change the banner. But the best thing that can happen is these people just leave him alone because they're harassing him now, saying, spamming up his pages, saying this guy is paid by Quid to fund Veve. And people who see that stuff, who, maybe they're new people who want to work with Paul, they're going to be like confused. They're like, what's this Quid thing? What's this Veve thing? Why are people like spamming you about this? And he probably just doesn't want to deal with it. So it's like, it's a simple fix for him. That was my speculation anyway. Maybe he just felt like changing his banner. It's nothing related to that. But yeah, like, it was interesting. So I've completely forgotten what the thing. What AI. Yes, AI. Yeah. So what I said was, what I speculate is he's probably going to add it back the next spool cycle, because what I noticed with these crypto news outlets is they always want to be the first to jump on a niche. So last cycle we had all these kind of crypto news outlets jumping on NFTs and jumping on the metaverse. And the cycle before that, we had all these crypto news outlets jumping on decentralized exchanges. And I think this cycle is going to be heavily based around layer 2s, Web3 gaming, and AI. So Sandbox, they're actually deleveraging themselves a bit. Sorry, not Sandbox, Animoca Brands. They're deleveraging themselves a little bit with the metaverse stuff. I think they're deleveraging themselves by like 20%, and they're focusing a bit more on AI now.
Interesting.
And so what I suspect is, because Animoca is now looking more AI as well, they're diversifying, that's what they do. What's going to happen is, I suspect once Animoca does more stuff on AI, Paul Barron and those guys, all news outlets do this, they're going to try and want to jump on that AI niche and be like, known as the source for AI in Web3 news. Everyone starts watching them, right? I suspect then he's going to probably like, slap it back on, reintroduce it, we're covering Animoca, which is a big investor in Web3 AI, covering these guys. We're the source of AI news. If you want to know, come to us. And that's the play that we usually see with these news outlets. And I think that's perfectly cool. Like if you want to, be that holy source of truth of some niche.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I totally love what you're saying, like about like the the whole how that all kind of played out, like and the thought process behind it. And I think people were kind of probably jarred by just the timing, because they're like, wait a second, like Paul Barron is like tweeting out Veve, and it's like amazing because it gets like all the users engaged and into like that kind of content. And then it's like, hey, wait a second, Veve is not the one. It's and I think that's why they're like, oh, well, this is kind of weird how they changed course, but I think the other piece of it too is like, like as much as Vivi's great for all of us, there's so many other winning opportunities out there. And that's where I'm hoping that there'll be just a little more harmony amongst like the space, because it's like if you have multiple winning projects that everybody's kind of growing, the only thing that I find is that like, because Veve has probably still such a strong amount of people, I mean, despite the relative proportion of the bear market, that like getting people interested into other things as well is probably why people are trying to capitalize on Veve. Do you know what I mean? Because they know there's a lot of users in there that would want to probably be interested in similar technology, similar kind of things.
100%.
So, yeah. So I just think people see it sometimes the wrong way in this like negative light, when despite the competitiveness or despite like, things meaning different things to different people, there's opportunities, man. And you don't want to just be completely, like we talked about, just like going down one path only, when there's multiple to take, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think this is the thing is, so this would be like a bit of a, not necessarily a criticism, but a thought to always consider, right? Is the way that Vive's business model works is they want to target non Web3 people, non crypto people, mainstream users. So
Yeah.
it's just cool. Like, I always thought, if you can do that and do it well, then you can capture an uncaptured portion of the market share. You're not competing with just Web3 people. You're bringing on board people that aren't part of Web3. But to do that effectively, you need to also, in your kind of business model, focus heavily on education, like Web3 education. Like, you can't just bring non-Web3 people on and expect them to understand all the nuances and all these, like, Web3 kind of based things of, like, basically understand what it is that they hold, like how to protect themselves. All that, like, education has to be super like at the forefront of everything, so that these guys they're equipped with the right knowledge to navigate this space. Basically, you should be a product that can onboard people, not just bring in people and then let them kind of, wander around blind, right? So I think Vivi needs to really focus on that aspect, because what's going to end up happening is, you're going to have these people, they're going to have their first experience of Vivi, and because they weren't equipped with the right knowledge, they might end up having negative experiences, which is kind of partly what we saw in last January when everything pumped and people buying in on the VV pump, and it was their first experience of Web3. Like, imagine coming in on the VV pump, it's your first
Yeah.
experience of Web3, you buy something and it drops 90%, and you're like, this was a scam. Like, I would say the same thing. I said the same thing the first time I was in crypto. I was like, oh, I guess it was a scam. So,
Yeah.
like, you don't want to leave them with that kind of impression. You want to help them understand, like, why, we've had this bear market, like, what is the importance of, like, non-custodial versus custodial ownership, like how to protect yourself. One thing I really strongly encourage is, do try the Crypto Zombies course, just to read smart contracts from a basic level, because then you understand how they work. And when you understand how they work, you understand how scammers will scam people. Because a good example,
See,
right?
that's important, man. Let's get into that, because that's what I think a lot of people that don't know Web3 enough are
Yeah.
afraid of, right? It's like, so that's
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, so one important aspect is there. So this, the thing is, because people came into the VV community, a lot of them are collectors, and they do get introduced to other Web3 projects, which I think VV did a good job at. Is they create these kind of micro communities. So you've got, within VV, you've got then people who then branch off into Hero,
Yeah.
Bat Cows, a kid called Beast, and like Bored Apes
Broadside.
and
Yeah.
whatever, like the Yuga Lab stuff, coders and things like that. So I'll use Kid Called Beast for example, right? Because this is a real life example. It happened recently. Is because these people, they weren't like, they weren't equipped with the right knowledge to understand how smart contracts and things work and how scammers use them, right? Is some people launched a very convincing, fake looking Kid Called Beast webpage, and they're like, oh, so I connect my wallet and I can mint my Kid Called Beast, right, or wherever it was, right? And so they connected their wallet, and what they didn't realize is, when they hit that connect, what they were actually doing was they were signing away permissions for that person to drain their wallet, basically, and they didn't know, like, what they were signing, like how it worked. And so there's a couple of things, right? Firstly, don't ever sign anything unless you know 100% what it does. You should be able to read the contract. Or if you can't read the contract, ask someone to basically audit the contract for you who can read it. Like, hey, I'm going to interact with this contract. Does it look dodgy or does it look safe? And then secondly, I personally never, ever sign contracts with my main wallet anyway. I have a second wallet, which is just blank, and it's got like a few $100s or something, just enough to mint something. And so even if I sign something dodgy and they gain access to that wallet and they can drain it, what are you going to drain? Like, maximum a few $100s. Okay, yeah, that kind of sucks, but it could be worse, right? And so, to be honest, I actually don't store my stuff on MetaMask anyway. I use a Nano Ledger S. Like, I can't remember where I keep it.
Okay, I'm just gonna say something quickly. Somebody said it was pretty funny. They're like, first of all, a lot of people are saying great conversation, but somebody's like, hey, it's like people connecting to their wallets to everything with no protection is like using no rubbers. And,
Yeah,
and I think that's a lot of people got. I know what you're talking about. It's when essentially their Twitter got taken over momentarily, and then people used a different address, and they were just draining wallets one after another, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
then, like you said, some people had like 3-4 ETH. Some people had like, I think like they got under control within like, I don't know, half an hour. But like, yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, so I think with everything that kind of happens, that kind of whole learning experience, I think, is important for people. So moving forwards, what I would like is, people to just encourage that conversation, encourage that education, but also Vivi to make take a more active approach with the education side, because that's kind of like what they pitched in early days. Is they were meant to be like a bit of an educational platform as well, because they said what they wanted to do was inside the app or inside the web app, they wanted to like have like like articles and things people could read to like kind of understand a bit more about like how the app works and all that side of things. Um, uh, and so eventually, the idea was once those people understand a bit more about Web3, they'd be more open to the OMI token, things like that. And so,
Mm.
yeah, that was partly why I was like, oh yeah, you know what, like I think this could be a very good use case for the OMI token. Is people they discover Web3 first time, they get into Vv, then they learn more about Web3, then they learn about how to be onboarded with the OMI token, and then start OMI token gets more adoption, and it kind of snowballs from there. That was like the initial approach, and I would like them to like kind of go back and like really focus on that approach, come with a good strategy, because it's going to help them as well.
That's really cool, man. I love that. And I noticed like I tweeted out like, like, hey man, we're doing this show together. And I've always had like, we've always had a really good rapport. I don't know.
Mm.
I feel like I try to get along with everybody. And I
Yeah,
felt
no,
like
that's good. Yeah,
and a lot of people were like, oh, like what happened to Kay? Like he sold some stuff off, or like maybe people have kind of misinterpreted potentially like, like the connection that you still have. Like I said to you before, like
mm.
I see you somebody that represents the entire Web3 space, not just Vivi, not just like a certain platform. And
Yeah,
I think like, you're trying to come at it from like an educational lens and sharing your own perspective,
yeah,
despite whether or not that might align with somebody else's. I think it's just like I said, we talked about before, is like having everybody on here. And I think you're still like, like supporting like in terms of that movement of the space. And I'm sure like you said, you get a why a lot of people are so interested in VV because of the collectibles, because it's Marvel, it's Disney, and it's all these things that people
mm.
really hold dear to their heart, and the fandom and what have you. But I was just kind of curious because I was like totally unaware. I was like, man, I love this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean
um
it's an interesting one, right? Because it goes back to a conversation I had earlier, where a lot of people they don't have the context and they don't have like the foundational knowledge to understand what it is I'm talking about, and they don't care
mhm.
about learning it. They just want to say what they want to say. They're in it for the quick profit, and then they're out. Like if you fud the bags, like that's it. You're paid by someone. You're it's just about like confirmation bias. So from my perspective, right, like I said, I'm very pro education, and then also on that, because I've I've worked with tech startups. I've seen tech startups do well, and I've seen tech startups who could have done well just absolutely crash and burn. And
Yeah.
there are
And
certain, like I said before, there are flags that I've noticed and I look at. And so one a good case study, right, is over a year ago. This was January 2022. So around the time when the pump was happening, and the app was kind of becoming more unstable because we had like that huge like botting issue with
remember
people
that.
just literally hammering the app. And then eventually the market kind of really kind of came down, and the bots like kind of went off and did something else. And then yeah, like at that time, I was seeing post IMX migration, like they were dealing with other stuff, which is kind of setting them back. But there were kind of flags that I was looking at, and one flag, and I'm going to bring up the exact example, right? So early on, they had like a problem with a contract. Apparently made a typo or something. So that to me signified they didn't test the contract properly. And what ended up happening is they end up burning by accident 100 billion OMI tokens from their own
Oof.
wallet. So
Oh my
that's why
god.
that's why the total supply is actually fake as well. But from early on, they were already down 100 billion tokens. So we don't have 750 billion tokens. We have 650 billion. That's the true number. Obviously, that's less than now because we burned some, we did other stuff, etc. But just that 100 billion was gone, and that was because the tokens were meant to be unlocked at a certain day, and apparently at that date was typoed to be like the year 20,000 rather than 2000 and something, right? So that to me signified they hadn't tested the contract. So that's like a very simple thing. That's like going to a hospital and them not using sterile needles to do your blood. It's like that level of fundamental, right? And so I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe. And then after I listened to an interview, it made sense because David told us that the company nearly ran out of money. Like it
Remember
was going
that.
to be like a project that they were just going to like, oh, yeah, we had a good run. let's find the next big thing. But they were encouraged to launch anyway, and they managed to like dip their pockets a bit deeper just to like kind of get the product out, and it did well because the timing was perfect. But for that reason,
Right.
I kind of understood, okay, like a lot of this tech is going to have, it's going to be a bit clunky. It's going to be kind of like, duct taped together in a sense because they had to rush it out. They ran out of money. They're like, let's just throw out what we got. If we can't test it, we can't test it. So I was like, okay, fine. So I kept making that point. I was like, okay, I know like the structure of like where Veve is at in terms of like startups because I've seen many tech startups and I know kind of like where they're lacking. And I was very pro technical leadership, encouraging them hire people who are used
I
to
remember that.
scaling up startups. And I was always saying technical leadership. Like look at Fang companies, tech leads from there. These guys have worked with startup like Veve and they know exactly this type of problem that Veve is going through that I can see. For example, the testing pipelines to improve those, because then you're not going to introduce the bugs that people are experiencing, and then you're not going to expend the resources on customer support. Then you're not going to have Alex out there basically fighting fires. He can actually focus on marketing for once.
Right.
You're gonna have that thing. And then I didn't see that, and I kept making that point. I'm like, you guys really need to do it now. You really need to do it now. But some people, they're like, oh, Hellokay's flooding. He's saying that Veve's not hiring, and that's like a weird spin of it. But the other aspect, hypothetically, let's say they did do that and they fixed up their contracts and their back end, they introduced really good testing pipelines. What could have happened is, and I suspect this is what would have happened, is they would have caught that bug with the Dumbo minting early on, because it would have
Right.
been picked up in a test that a public address can't mint number 40 and below. It would have been picked up right away. And
Wow.
because they didn't introduce that technical leadership early on to fix the testing pipelines, that bug did get introduced. And look at the big fuss it caused. It caused, Paul Barron to put out that funny meme. To be honest, I think he was just kidding anyway, like, no disrespect to him. But it caused
Yeah.
a lot of
I know
upset
what you mean.
people, a lot of unsettling in the community, people saying these are not the real NFTs again because they can just take it back. If you had just written one test, which would have taken not very long, like 30 minutes, right? You write the test, test it, etc. You would have saved a lot of hassle. And that all comes back to like what I said before is there are high level developers out there that have done this and they have seen these problems and they know exactly what to do. Those are the people in these like FANG companies, because Facebook, Amazon, Google, these are companies which service millions of people at the same time. So the type of problems and the type of architecture for your software that you design is going to be very different. And you have seen problems that regular developers in like these small companies or freelancers, they're never ever going to see in their life, because you're in a very high level position. So conversely, Immutable X, they did exactly what I was suggesting, but they kind of took it to the top. Like they went over the top. They hired like half their team. Like they've got a team of like 120 plus engineers, very high
Jeez.
level, and half of them come from Amazon and Google. And it's like they must have invested like tens of millions of dollars into that tech side. But Robbie said that he raised $80 million from one round last bull cycle, and he's still got tons of money to like keep this runway going. And so because of that reason, IMX has been literally shipping up product after product. They got the
Amazing.
game, they got the marketplace, they got the passport, they got the Unity SDK.
Yeah.
They've launched like I don't even know what else to launch. They're launching stuff like every week, and the stuff works. It doesn't like you launch it and it breaks and there's bugs, like because it's
Yeah.
well tested, well designed. And I've spoken to the employees. I met the devs. I went to the IMX dev meet in Amsterdam. Actually, it was quite fun. I got like a IMX hat and hoodie and stuff. But yeah, like I spoke to them in person, spoke about like IMX L2 and things like that. And it's interesting. And this is something I encourage people to do. Right? Is there's a website called Glassdoor, and you can see reviews of the company by employees. If you go on Glassdoor for IMX, but it's anonymous, so people are more truthful because it's anonymous. IMX reviews are very positive, and when I met them in person, they were all very happy to work at the company.
Wow.
Whereas if you look at some other projects, I'm not going to name the names, but there are some projects that haven't done very well. Not Veve, but like Veve's not even on Glassdoor actually, but there are some projects that were hyped and didn't do very well. And when you look at the Glassdoor reviews for them, okay, I'll name one. One of them was Rika, right? If you look at Rika on Glassdoor, it's so funny. Like some of the reviews from the employees there, they were like, one stuck with me because I laughed. One guy said, if you value your personal reputation, do not work here. But like, and it goes to show Rika did end up having a lot of fundamental problems, which affected like the whole business model, the value of the collectibles, the community sentiment, adoption, like retention. Um, and whereas IMX, they've just been growing and growing and growing, and they're
Right.
still growing. Yeah, so it's like you can see the difference. And so I state these things because I've seen this with tech startups, and I've seen it happen before. And I think people, they tend to overvalue maybe David Yu's technical knowledge or Dan's technical knowledge, or like, because the thing is, the core team, they're very good at certain things, but I think people let the team's strengths in some areas overshadow their weaknesses in other areas, which I can tell is the Web3 side of things. And I think other people have noticed that. And so that's why I point these things out, because I genuinely don't think they themselves can often see this. They need someone to point it out. I think now they have Mitch, who's helped a lot, because Mitch comes from the same world as me. And that's why Mitch and I, we get along so well, because we agree on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and Mitch seems to really be hopping and moving.
Yeah, but Mitch came on like a bit late in the game, though. If Mitch had come like, let's say 2 months before that January hype, that probably would have been enough time for him to get accustomed, and he probably would have helped make those changes back then, which would have prevented the things that we're seeing that going wrong now from happening, like the weird Dumbo min and all of that stuff.
I totally agree, man. And I think like, I think that's where some people are getting frustrated, because they're like, oh, there's delays and there's these things, and not everything's kind of living up to what they're saying, but at least we're still seeing some progression. I mean, at least they came out with like, at least they're on IMX. I mean, that was a big step back in the day. I mean, the cash shot, I'm hoping to come back, but listen, man, I know I've been holding you up for an hour 45, and I just want to say, like, listen, thanks for coming on. I've always wanted to have you on the channel, so
likewise, thank you for having me,
man. Like, and I, like I said, I love picking your brain, and I really appreciate you kind of like taking us down that really kind of interesting, knowledgeable kind of like pathway where I could actually understand everything that's going on behind closed doors. I think a lot of people appreciated that, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually one other thing I like to show you as well, actually. Whilst I'm getting it, like, so I used to actually be a high school science teacher, so I'm like kind of used to trying to, really break things down into like condensable, like bite-sized chunks, and like ways that way, if you don't have the context, like how do I kind of convey it? Yeah, I want to like give shout out to Sleeping Comics, because I want to pull up one of my slides.
Oh shit!
Yeah, Sleeping Comics got me this.
Oh, that's so sick, man.
Yeah, this is quite cool. It's the secret rare cover on Veve Strange Tales.
Dude, that's amazing, man. And like, that's cool that like, so Sleeping actually went out of his way to ship that to you and everything.
No, we were in LA together, and Anaheim, and there was a comic book store. And Sleeping Comics and we went to the comic book store, and then he was like, all right, Kay, we got to get you a comic book. Which one do you want? And I was like, oh, I do like Doctor Strange. And he just literally bought it for me. And I was like, and he's like, here's your gift. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Wow. This is my first slab comic. And so I like kind of keep it up there. Yeah. It's quite a cool one. The Strange Tales.
Dude, that's crazy that he just like, this is the other thing that I love about this community, man. Like, people just buy stuff for you. They're like, and this is what I'm saying. That's why I don't want to leave either. Like, somebody bought me this, the Batman Who Laughs, and just sent it to me. Be Real With You is his Twitter name. But I was like, and look at now, this person's tipping. Like, what I'm trying to say is just people are so supportive in this space. And like, that's why I'm just like so confident and positive about where this is going to go in the future. But listen, man, like I said, we need you, like we need your knowledge, and I appreciate your perspective.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I like the way that you do it. You know what I mean? Like, you're critical, but you're still like, hey, like let's have a conversation. You know what I mean? Let's not just like, oh, screw this, or like, I appreciate that, bro.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I mean, like I said, like I really like your kind of outlook, your drive, your personality, like everything. Like I said, like you inspired me that day when you showed that video. You like flipped your way up to that 10K golden move league. I appreciate that. Like, Chad's onto something here. Like, I need to try and get my flipping game on. Didn't work out too well, because partly because I was like, oh, you know what, like I can't be asked. It's too time consuming. I've got to pay the fees. What if it doesn't work out? I'd rather just buy and hold, like, because I was just buying one of everything. Like, collector mode. I just bought one of everything. Which
is still pretty remarkable, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people did what you did and did pretty well too. So
I mean, one of everything. If you bought right at the start in that last run, like even after the run, like you did well.
And a lot of people, man, just really appreciate you coming on. One of those guys here, this, David Granillo, he's Mr. 41 ETH. He says the K is super knowledgeable. We got Biscuits here, who's kind of spreading out to the wider macro Web3 world, and who's obviously a big time collector. We got Win Tran, who's in the Miles Secret Rare Club. I mean, so many people in here. Michael, who's like, as you know, has got over 6,000 VV NFTs. So, a lot of people just really kind of appreciate you, coming on, Kay, and giving your knowledge to all of us, man. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. There's actually I'll probably speak to you offline on this. There's something there's a stream I want to invite you on, because it's going to be a stream where there's going to be something revealed, and I wanted to get people's live reactions on it, because I think your reaction will be really, really good.
Okay.
It might be a stream in like a couple of months, but I think your reaction will be good on it.
Oh, damn. I'm excited. I think I might know where this might be going. So if it's the case, I don't know, man. I'm gonna be going crazy. You might I might have to get like a horse tranquilizer to keep me level headed. Awesome. Well, hey man, thanks again for coming on, and I can't wait to do it again with you. All right.
Yeah, no worries.
K announcing K token.
Ain't no token.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Peace.